collapsed on the ice and never got back up. It happened in November of 1995 to one of the most iconic pairs in figure skating, Sergei Grinkov and Ekaterina Gordeeva. He was 28 years old, an Olympic champion in peak physical condition during a routine practice. How does someone at that level simply fall on the ice and never stand again? And what happened to Ekaterina Gordeeva after that day? To understand that moment, we need to go back, long before the medals, before the sold-out arenas, before they became the standard of pair skating for the entire world. She was 11, he was 15. Two children on a Moscow rink, paired together by coaches, not because of some special story, and not because anyone saw something extraordinary. They simply matched in height and technique. In pair skating, everything is built on trust, the kind that takes years to develop. When he lifts her above his head with one arm, when he throws her into the air, knowing she will land back into his hands without even seeing them, there is no room for error. Either the trust is there or it isn't. There is no middle ground. At first, they were just partners. He was calm, reserved, already physically strong. She was small, disciplined, trying not to fall behind. Hours of training every day, cold rinks, endless repetition of the same elements, falls, bruises, arguments that didn't end in resolution, just silence, because the next day meant the same ice and the same work. And gradually, the results came. First junior competitions, then senior medals, 4 world championships, 2 European titles, and Olympic gold in Calgary. They were still very young, but they skated as if they had been doing it their entire lives. No rush, no panic, not a single unnecessary movement. Commentators often said they looked like one person on the ice, and it wasn't an exaggeration. But for a long time, there was nothing personal between them. Ekaterina later said she felt too ordinary next to him. Sergei paid attention to other girls. On the ice, they held hands thousands of times. In life, they barely connected. Travel, competitions, years of pressure, and those small moments that exist only between two people and nowhere else. All of it slowly did its work. Somewhere in the late 80s, between practices and travel, something started to change. Not in their programs, not in their results, but in the way they looked at each other off the ice. They got married in 1991. Soon after, their daughter Daria was born. Around the same time, the Soviet Union collapsed. The country was changing, and many athletes were leaving. Gordeyeva and Grinkov moved to the United States and began performing in the Stars on Ice tour. Sold-out arenas, stability, a home, a family. A completely different life from where they started. But they weren't done with competition. After turning professional, they did something almost no one does. They returned to the Olympics, and in Lillehammer, they won gold again. This wasn't just confirmation of their level. It was the moment that secured their place in history. By 1995, they had everything: success, money, recognition, and a family. From the outside, everything looked perfect. And then came the first signal, and no one recognized it as one. That summer, Sergei started complaining about back pain. Not chest pain, not pressure, just his back. Athletes live with pain. It's part of the job. No one paid much attention. Doctors looked at his back and treated his back. But there was something else. In his family, there had already been serious heart problems. His father had died from a heart attack at a relatively young age. In a different situation, that could have been a reason for a full cardiac evaluation. But at 28, in that kind of physical condition, with the level of training he handled without visible issues, the idea of a heart problem simply didn't come up. Not for him, not for the doctors, not for the coaches.
November 20th, Lake Placid, a regular practice. Music, ice, running through the program. At one point, Sergei slowed down and slightly leaned forward. Ekaterina thought, his back again. And then, he collapsed. At first, no one understood what was happening. Coaches came over. Then, very quickly, everything changed. Someone called for medical help. Ekaterina tried to get closer, but she was held back while they worked on him right there on the ice. Just minutes earlier, it had been a normal training session. Nothing unusual, nothing that could have warned anyone.
They tried to resuscitate him on the ice. It was a massive heart attack. He was 28 years old. And that's the part that didn't make sense. How does an Olympic champion in peak physical condition collapse during practice at 28? The answer came later. Doctors found severe narrowing of the coronary arteries, a hereditary condition that had developed over time and had never been diagnosed. The vessels supplying blood to the heart were critically narrowed. And this is the key point. Physical form didn't protect him. It masked the problem. His body adapted to the load, his heart kept working, but the vessels continued to narrow. The warning signs were there, the back pain, the fatigue, but they didn't look dangerous. And there was one more detail. In his family, heart problems had already happened. His father had died from a heart attack at a relatively young age. In another situation, that could have been enough to trigger a deeper cardiac check, but not here. At 28, performing at the highest level without visible issues, no one connected it. According to Ekaterina's book, My Sergei, doctors later believed that the night before, he had most likely already experienced a small, silent episode. No sharp pain, no clear symptoms, no panic. Something that could feel like normal fatigue after a long day. He went to sleep, he woke up, he came to the rink. By the time he stepped onto the ice, his heart was already at its limit. The training load became the final point. Everything ended within minutes. The partnership that had started when they were 11 and 15 ended in the middle of a normal training day, without warning. The news spread instantly. For years, people had watched Gordeyeva and Grinkov as something stable, precise, almost untouchable. And suddenly, that image broke. Ekaterina was 23. She had spent almost her entire life next to him. Childhood, youth, adulthood. Everything was built around one person. After that day, the ice felt empty. For a long time, she didn't return. But it was also the only thing she knew. A year later, she came back, alone. The program was called Celebration of Life. She controlled every movement, held herself together, until she couldn't. She broke down during the performance. In the audience, their daughter watched her mother skate alone for the first time.
Life didn't stop. Years passed. Ekaterina continued skating professionally for many years after that. She stayed in shows, performed regularly, and kept working in the same world, but in a different role, without the life she had known since childhood. She later married Olympic champion Ilya Kulik, and they had a daughter, Elizaveta. They settled in the United States, where Ekaterina continued to skate, coach, and take part in ice shows. Over time, the performances became less frequent, but skating remained part of her life. Daria grew up. She built her own life outside of professional sport, but her father always remained part of her story. Years turned into decades. Ekaterina didn't return to the life she had before. She built a different one, step by step, staying in the same world, but on her own terms, not replacing the past, just continuing forward.